If you're part of the law enforcement family, this is your show. Here we talk about all things Leo family life, the good, the bad, the funny, and the sad, and everything in between. Crime is exploding across America. Defunding the police is causing even more chaos and increased crime in communities we live, work, and raise our families. Defunding the police, ironically, requires more police officers to work overtime, which costs taxpayers more money and leads to decreased officer morale, increased burnout, and unfortunately, more mistakes. Less than lethal options will simply result in more fatal police shootings. We need your support to refund the police. Fight back against defunding the police. Politicians want to slash police. Tell them no. Do your part to support police. Show you care. Your donations will go towards development of a national media advertising blitz to rally Americans who are sick and tired of the attacks on law enforcement and focus on the negative impact the Defund the Police movement is having on our country. The establishment of a strike team of researchers and reporters to highlight the devastating impact of defunding the police. And we will work within our communities to highlight both positive stories of law enforcement.
So I'm throwing them the thank you party to show them I still appreciate them. To my heroes, I want to say don't stop. Please don't give up. Many do not care or appreciate the sacrifices that you make every day, but I do.
And bring you the stories that are ignored by the mainstream media. Donate today, and together, let's refund the police. Hey, welcome back for another episode of Blue Family Unity. You know who I am. At least I hope you do. I'm Elsa Kurt, the host of this show. So thanks for joining me. I appreciate you guys tuning in and checking out whatever the heck I'm talking about this week. And but this week, listen, this week is really cool. A couple weeks ago, I had the great honor of talking to a terrific couple, Stephen and Christina. And the episode was about the stigma of mental health issues in law enforcement. And his goal is to dispel a lot of these misconceptions and myths and old trains of thought that was predominant in law enforcement when it came to mental health and discussing mental health. And so as a follow-up to that, I am very fortunate to have a really terrific guy on the show today. His name's James Rascati. He's a clinical social worker who works specifically with law enforcement and firefighter families. So this was such a big deal to talk to him and to hear some of the things that he said, because there's a lot of things that I certainly wasn't aware of that he brought to light, a lot of resources, a lot of opportunities, and he dispels a lot of the myths that we have all come to believe when it comes to seeking help as a law enforcement officer. So this truly is a must listen or must watch show, whatever the case is. If you're listening on the podcast or watching on Right America Media or YouTube or wherever you find me, this is when you're really going to want to watch and save and take down some information from this guy, because he's the real deal and he really loves what he does, and I couldn't have been more happy to have him on the show. So take a listen. Hello, how are you?
Good. It's finally nice to meet you with all the
It is
bumps.
so nice. It's very nice to meet you. So I will officially introduce you. This is my new friend, James Rascati. Did I pronounce your last name right?
You did.
Excellent. Excellent. And you are a behavioral health consultant, right?
That's the name of my company. I'm a partner with 3 other psychologists, and the company is Behavioral Health Consultants. By training, I'm a clinical social worker.
Thank you. Okay, excellent. And you, I want to say that you specialize, I don't know if that's fair to say that you specialize, but it is definitely a big field for you, but you specialize in helping law enforcement and fire department employees and families through behavioral health issues. That a fair assessment?
I think that's an excellent assessment. I think that's true. That's one of the niches, the specialties my company has, is working with first responders, police, fire, and EMTs. Yes, that's correct.
Nice. Okay, so specifically, what exactly do you do? Do you go into departments? Do they come to you? How does that exactly work?
Good. Okay. So there's two parts. So an employee assistance program is when organizations, companies, towns, and municipalities provide counseling services, typically not just for the employees, but immediate family members. So EAPs began roughly 65 years ago, treating alcohol in the workplace because it was a problem. Over the years, EAPs have evolved to become what's called more broad brush EAPs. We deal with any issues, not just mental health and substance abuse, stress, family issues. So that's one aspect of the EAP. So your husband's department, right? They provide an employee assistance program for everyone in the police department. But those counseling services are also available for the families, the husbands, the wives, the partners, the children still on the health benefit plan. The problem is a lot of family members of law enforcement may not realize that their husband-wife partner's department provides counseling services. So,
and I can attest to that. I can attest to that.
Right?
In our email exchange, when you told me that, I had no idea. So, and I would like to think that I'm not the only one out there that didn't know this information. So this is truly such valuable information for families to know that help is available to them as well. So that's blew me away.
Correct. So counseling, again, for any sort of issue for the employee and immediate family members, that's one aspect of the EAP. But the other aspect of the EAP is training, right? In any contract that we have, there's a certain number of training hours, right? And those can be used for, I happen to be, and my partner happens to be, a post-certified instructor. So the topics that we're certified in are depression and suicide, substance abuse, stress management, and supervisor-subordinate relationships. Those are the 4 post-certified courses that if a department brought us in, they're not paying for that. It's included in the fee we're charging for the EAP. So you have the clinical services through the EAP, you have training services through the EAP, but the other services we provide are peer support, training, and development, right? And we do that usually once a year. We invite all our departments to send volunteers. It's a day of training. We are not billing the department for that training. It's included in our EAP contract. Okay. The fact of the matter is we now work with 57 police departments in the state of Connecticut, and I believe there's only 102 or 106 police departments. So we have more than half of them. Out of that number, we have 42 police peer support teams that we trained and developed. Now, in all fairness, 2 of those, Manchester Police Department and Stamford, they already had a police peer support before we ever were contracted with them to provide EAP. So the other thing that we that we also include is response to critical incidents. So, whether it was the May 2nd regional SWAT explosion 2 years ago, we responded to that. We responded to any sort of major critical incident. Any of the departments we work with has the ability to call us and we'll have a discussion. Do we come to the department right now? Do we go to the scene? Do we do something tomorrow morning? There's no right or wrong answer to that. But the ability to respond to major critical incidents is extremely important because the clinical research shows stress builds up over time, right? It's not just this call, it's this call on top of the call I had 6 months ago, on top of my family stressors, my financial worries, whatever it is. And that's been a systemic change, a good change, that more agencies are calling us because 10, 12 years ago, they weren't as receptive to bringing in a culturally competent mental health professional to work with the police officers. Now, because your program is the Blue Family Unity, the thing that we don't do adequately, in my mind, is reach out to families. And that's why when your husband talked to me about this program and the nature of this program, I jumped at the opportunity because we can't reach out to families. So as an example, if something happened in your husband's department, terrible acts, doesn't matter what it is, it's going to impact the spouses, the family members.
Right.
I couldn't reach out to you if I don't know you.
Very interesting. That's
Right?
interesting. So the only way that you could be of assistance to the families is if they have to reach out to you, basically, right?
Correct. Now, what we
Interesting.
also do, though, you'll see over the next few minutes, I'm a pretty straight shooter. I'm going to tell you what's on my mind. I am not always right, that's for sure.
That's okay.
What we now start to do, both in our trainings, employer orientations, or critical incident response, is to remind the officers that your job is not just about you, right? It does impact the family. Now, obviously, I'm preaching to the choir. That's why you started this program.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that is so true. This is such a passion project for me. I think it's so important to have strong, healthy home lives for these officers, and of course for ourselves, of course. But of course, we're talking about the job specifically of being a law enforcement officer. And as you well know, and I well know, the stresses of the job, the things that they may encounter, the traumas that they encounter, which is quadruple, if not more, what the average person sees. It's the contrast is insane. So my thinking, and lots of people like me are thinking, is that if they have this home as a haven, if home is the haven for you, for the whole family, they can go out and do their jobs in a healthy minded way. So and that's why I jumped at this too. As soon as my husband told me that he talked to you and that he offered us, I couldn't get to my email fast enough to send you a message to get you on here, because this is huge to me. And I think the benefit is just limitless for families and for law enforcement.
Yes. The issue is really getting the message out. Right. So the other thing you should know about EAPs is that the majority of them are prepaid. So what do I mean by that? The larger municipalities we work with, Bridgeport, New Haven, New London, Greenwich, they pay us quarterly. Right. And the EAP services are for all the town municipal employees. We get paid quarterly, whether anyone uses it or not. That's a wonderful business model. Right?
Yes.
You're providing a service, no one uses it, you still get paid.
Right.
Like you, I'm fairly passionate about this work for all clients, not just first responders.
Sure.
More so for first responders, because in the last 18 years, I personally responded to 9 police suicides and 4 firefighter suicides. And those events are devastating for any employer group, let alone for first responders, because of the family cohesiveness and stuff like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Have you seen in this time, and you probably have, I hope that you have you seen a dramatic, or at least some change in the mindset, the mentality about mental health, or really the stigma of mental health problems in particularly law enforcement?
Without question.
Are you seeing a change in that it's improving, that they are more receptive to getting help than they were, say, even 5-10 years ago? Or is there still a lot of resistance to seeking and accepting help?
Right. So both of that statement is true. Right. There's been a significant change. There are still obstacles to getting help. The fear that, I'm less of a cop if I talk to someone, the fear that it's going to jam me up on my job, the fear of what are other people going to think about me if I acknowledge I'm talking to a mental health professional. So we still have more work to do, but there's no question, Elsa, that we've had a paradigmatic shift over the last 7-8 years. Let me give you an example of that. There was a relatively small police department, 40-45 officers, where there was horrific domestic murder about 2 years ago. That was followed within 6-7 months later of an officer-involved shooting fatality. Now, I got called for both of them. And in talking with the chief before I met with the officers who fired their weapon, he said to me, he goes, "Jim, we would not have seen this 5 years ago." meaning calling someone to come to meet their officers. Now, again, and those two events preceded the pandemic, preceded COVID, right? And to your point about stress, law enforcement has always been a stressful profession, always. And it doesn't matter if it's a relatively small department, like where your husband works, or a big town and municipality. That's been exacerbated tremendously over the last 18 months because of COVID, the social unrest, the defund the police, and all the other crap. So, but yes, more people are inclined to use these services. We still have some resistances. You still get those officers who are concerned that their career is going to be jammed up. And when I do any sort of training for law enforcement, or even if it's an employee orientation meeting, what I always say to them is using mental health services is not going to jam you up on your career. Not taking care of my demon, whatever that demons are, that's what's going to jam me up on my career. Whether it's gambling, drinking, philandering, whatever it is, those are the issues that are going to jam people up. But using the EAP is not.
Well, you just answered my question, because I think that is probably, you know, every officer who is feeling that they might want to seek help or do want to seek help. Of course, the question is always, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose the respect of my peers? And that, I think that is that truly is their biggest deterrent, right? That fear of repercussions of that happening. So if I'm understanding right, there really isn't, I mean, obviously there would have to be something pretty dramatic and catastrophic and, you know, life-threatening or threatening to the lives of others with an officer who would come to you. But in the general sense of the word, it's not going to make them lose their job if they seek help, basically, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Exactly correct. Exactly correct. And that's part of the education that we need to do, both
Absolutely.
as an EAP, the departments need to do that. And I have to say, the other thing that's been of tremendous value and help in changing the stigma and the fear issue is the development of police peer support. Because this is what I say to people. I don't care what the call is. And again, I'm preaching to the choir. You know what your husband and his colleagues see on a day-to-day basis. What I always say is you've got to talk to someone. And I'm not necessarily saying mental health, your colleagues, your family. Most first responders, both cops and firefighters, in my experience, do not come home and share with their loved one the crap that they've seen in that particular right? By design.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
By design. And what I would say to cops or firefighters is, you don't need to go and share the intimate details of that gruesome scene, but just say to your well, you know what, I had a really fucked up day. Oops, excuse me.
That's okay.
Okay.
I swear like a truck driver. It's all good. This is a podcast, not cable TV. We're good.
Okay. And what I'll say to them, you have to talk to someone.
Right.
You can only compartmentalize things for so long. When I respond to a major critical incident for first responders, at the end of that, here's what I generally say to people. I know your culture enough to know many of you are going to go out after your tour, your shift ends, you're going to have a few drinks. I am not going to tell you not to drink with your buddies. What I am going to tell you is don't get shit-faced. Don't drink more than you normally do. It is not going to help you process that event at all. So peer support, the value of peer support is who bets. I could understand why a cop may not want to talk to me. I have two strikes against me. One, I'm a mental health professional, and two, I'm not a cop, right? And I get that. I really do. But you have to talk to someone. When we created our first peer team was in New Haven. Our first police department was 18 years ago. And we created peer team a year later. And the reason we created peer support was it doesn't matter the town and municipality. The two departments least likely to use EAP services, as you would guess, are police and fire departments. And yet, when you look at the epidemiology of first responders, higher rates of divorce, higher rates of stress, both acute stress and PTSD, higher rates of depression and suicide, higher rates of substance abuse. So 17 years ago, I'm scratching my head. How can this be? How can these two departments do so much for our community, not make use of these services? So we created our first peer support team about 17 years ago for New Haven. And as I said, we've replicated that. We now have about 42 police teams that we've trained and developed, because that can also be very helpful. In fact, what we typically do, depending upon the nature of the critical incident, is invite other police teams to join us, right? So
Nice.
New Haven Fire Department back in May, June, had 2 losses of beloved members of the departments. I contacted a couple of my fire department peer support teams to join me, right? So you were going to the engine houses. I have a firefighter for Stratford who's part of the peer team, a firefighter for East Haven who joined us. Waterbury sent a whole bunch of guys. So let those firefighters talk with them.
Right. And so how, so let's say a police department has a critical incident, they're in need of some peer support. They just call you guys up and say, hey, this is what we need, and you set it up. Basically, that's how it works.
Yeah.
And is that through the chief, or could an officer from any department call and say, this is what I'm needing right now? Is that
good? Great. So it typically comes from my contact in the police department, right?
okay?
You know, for example, the tragic situation that would happen with the New Haven officers who were out in Las Vegas. I got called that morning at 7:45 by the chief. I have such a strong relationship with New Haven because everything began in New Haven. And at that point, met with her and we planned what we were going to be doing over the next few days and weeks. The call to get us in action, so to speak, literally can come from anyone.
Okay.
So and here's the other thing I preach, especially to command staff about critical incidents. If you're not certain the event warrants a critical incident response, call us anyways. Let's at least have a discussion. Right. But literally anyone can call us. But almost always, it sometimes comes, believe it or not, from the union president.
Okay.
It will come from peer support guys who may be on the scene before the official call comes from command. So we have a lot of access points to get critical incident response engaged.
How do police officers or firefighters become peer support leaders, helpers? I don't know.
Sure.
What's the right word?
Sure. So what we recommend is when we do a training, we send an email out to, again, typically the chief or his or her designate. We're doing this on this particular date. These are the hours. This is the agenda. And what we recommend is that the department does some sort of due diligence, right? Because let's say I'm a police officer in your husband's department and I'm actively drinking. I'm a huge gossip, right? I am not a good candidate for police peer support, right? But let's say I'm an officer, I've gone through a battle of difficulty with alcohol. Maybe I've been divorced once, maybe twice, but I'm on the road to recover, right? I would be a good candidate for police peer support because the nature of the job is it can impact marriages. It does impact the abuse of alcohol and sometimes drugs. But there's nothing more powerful for a police officer who's gone through that, and to say to a brother officer, hey, I had a patch in my life where I was really fucked up. I called someone. It was helpful. It normalizes, especially if those officers are looking up to that cop. Right. And she can admit, yeah, there was a time I was messed up from the job. I talked to someone. It's helpful. It normalizes the experience. The other
Absolutely.
The other thing we do related to peer support is officer involved shootings, right? And I'm sure you know this. You know, less than 2-3% of officers fire their weapon in the line of duty, right? I'm not talking about qualifying on the range, right? So that's highly emotional, adrenaline-packed event that happens. Who better to help a cop navigate that, especially if they shot and killed someone, than another officer who's gone through that. So 19 years ago, before we had peer support, before we had any protocols on critical incident, there was a officer involved shooting fatality in New Haven of an emotionally disturbed person. I got called, I met with those officers. They had a lot of reticence to meet with an EAP guy. 19 years ago, there were no protocols, right? And I met with them, and my other partner met with the third. There were 3 officers involved. And a couple of weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, and you know the drill, if someone's involved in an officer-involved shooting, they're placed on administrative leave. 2 of the 3 officers who were engaged in a fatal shooting recontacted me, and I had some sessions with them. It was approximately 6 months, 8 months later, we had our first peer support training for the New Haven PD. I'm Italian. I get very emotional. When those 2 officers who were involved in that fatality came, I got all choked up because they were now ready to share their experience with other officers. Since that, 18 years ago, when there have been other officer-involved shootings and fatalities, even though a couple of those guys are retired from the police department, I called them, they joined me, right? And it is it's very important for them to give their contact information. And we never meet with, we follow the IACP protocols on officer-involved shootings. The shooters who actually fired their weapon, we do not meet with them in a group. We meet with them individually. So part of what I did in that situation is not only give them my information, I gave them the name of the New Haven cop who 19 years ago shot and killed someone. And and I've heard from some of those officers who it was so helpful to talk to that officer from New Haven.
You hear it over and over. You hear it over and over again, that weight, that burden just lifts, and you almost want to cry for them because you think about how long they've been carrying that. As you know, I interviewed a couple a little while back, and he's decided to come forward with his story and his struggles with mental health, and based on all of the trauma that he had experienced in his young life and then on the job. And he was just drowning in his life, basically, and his despair and his problems and his issues, and all out of fear of seeking help because of what he thought the repercussions might be. And he just talked about how that weight, like it became a balloon and just flew away, and that was what sparked his passion for getting his story out there. And I think it's amazing that you were able to compile and collect these people that are willing and able to do this for others. It's so impactful.
It really is. I cannot say enough about the benefit of having a trained cop firefighter become part of a peer support team to share their experiences, to normalize the fact, to normalize the sense that, okay, you have trouble sleeping, you're drinking, it doesn't mean you're losing your mind. I mean, I can say things, but what the hell do I know? I'm not a cop, I'm a mental health professional. To have a brother, sister, officer share those experiences and to normalize the experience, you're not less of a cop if you talk to someone. That's the paradigmatic shift that we're seeing. Now, are there still obstacles out there? Of course there are. But it is absolutely changing. Do we need to do a much better job? Absolutely we do. Do we need to do a much better job to reach out to families? We absolutely do. There's no question about that.
It's, and I think what you said about what we're talking about with the peer support, I think it's really important for law enforcement spouses and partners to hear that as well, because I think, and I see it a lot of times in our groups, I get, wives that will reach out to me and ask me, how do I get him to talk? Why won't he talk to me? What can I do? And all of those questions. And the truth is that sometimes, you have to let them talk to the people who live the experience, because we can tell them, all day and night that we think they're wonderful, they did the right thing, that we're there for them. We can tell them all that and show them all of that. But at the end of the day, you really do need someone in your life that can actually relate to your experiences. And we as spouses need to be okay with that,
Right. It is a tough one for the families. Let me give you another example if I can. So you may recall the South Central Regional SWAT explosion on May 2nd. The regional SWAT team, 6 departments, we had 5 of them in terms of the APs. Long story short, they responded to a domestic, a barn blew up. Literally 8 or 9 South Central Regional SWAT guys were blown 20, 30 feet in the air. We got called for that. My partner went to the scene. I went to the emergency room at Yale because that's where the family was going to be gathering, right?
Right.
A couple of days after that, they set up a debriefing for the entire SWAT team at Quinnipiac. The current chief, Kevin Glenn, was head of the SWAT team at the time. He arranged that with us. From that meeting, we decided we need to do something for the families because, again, you have 8 or 9 officers who were physically injured, well, possibly psychologically injured. So a week or 2 later, then it was, he's now Chief Kevin Glenn, set up a meeting at a restaurant, a pizza place in North Haven. And we had about 18 or 19 wives and or girlfriends there. And 2 of my colleagues, Dr. Kirshner, Dr. Legao, and I met with them. And again, this is 2 weeks after some of their husbands, boyfriends may not be returning to the job. It was filled with things like, my husband is drinking more. What do I do? How can I help him? Another wife said, my husband's an Iraqi war vet. He's been through IEDs and he's not going to talk to anyone. And part of what we shared with them is, and again, you know this, you can't force your husband, partner, or wife into treatment, but you should use the EAP. You should schedule time and make use of that benefit. How can you take care of yourself and support your husband or partner or spouse during this difficult time, right? So in fact, it was funny, well, not funny, a year or 2 later, there was an incident in another police department where officers were under fire, an idiot firing multiple rounds. Fortunately, the cops who were under siege did not get hit. We had another family meeting. And again, I don't remember a lot of people because I'm old, my memory's shot. We had about 7, 8 wives in this meeting, smaller department. And one of them immediately, she goes, I recognize you. She goes, you did the family meeting? And I said, yes, we did. So it is important. We don't do enough of that. I'll be really honest with you. And that's why when I talked to your husband, he said what you were doing, I said, this is a wonderful vehicle to get the information out there. Yes. I don't care where your spread is and people across the country. I'd be shocked if there's any police departments that do not have an employee assistance program.
I would think in this day and age, I would think that most, maybe you can't say all, but I would think that most do, or at least have some type of access to this type of programming. Now, you, of course, work only in Connecticut, right? You don't go anywhere else.
Pretty much, we're pretty much a Connecticut company. Now we have some of our civilian organizations have plants in different parts of the country. Right, so factories, so we covered them. But yes, you're correct. We're primarily Connecticut. Yeah. Okay.
So so this has been so great. So two huge takeaways here. One was that the services are accessible and available to families, as well as police officers. And 2, on the other side of that is that if there is anyone listening here, and of course Connecticut, or you would research it in your own area if you're not in Connecticut, but if this is something you feel like you could do and help others with your experiences, you can reach out and become a peer supporter. So that's two awesome takeaways from this. I mean, it's all good takeaways. This has been fantastic. The information is just so valuable and so incredible. And I almost feel this sense of relief from anybody who might be listening and realizing that I can get help. It's going to be okay. And, nothing bad is going to come of it. And I think you made such a great point too, that what you're doing to, self-medicate or self-help right now, the excessive drinking, they tend to shut down and close down emotionally. All of those things are more detrimental to your job and your home life then getting help would be. And that's such a huge, huge takeaway, I think. And I really hope that, I think we talked about maybe via email, if this helps one person, I think you said that if this helps
Yeah.
one person, gets them to reach out and get the help that they need, it's so worth it.